Imagine with me for just a moment. You've just spent months building your dream guitar and you can't put it down. You love it so much, you've been playing it nonstop. But already you've noticed that the fretboard is becoming dented and worn. It looks like it's been played for years and years. Or maybe you just built your dream workbench for your workshop and it's already dented up because, well, you dropped a hammer, as things like that tend to happen on a workbench. Why do these things seem to be wearing so fast? Well, it all comes down, I think, to the Janka scale. The Janka scale, what in the heck is that? Well, don't worry, in this episode, we're going to explore the Janka scale. We're going to figure out what it is, why you should know about it, and how it can help you choose the next piece of wood for your particular woodworking project, whether it's fine furniture or maybe your dream guitar. Make sure you stick around. Hey there, my DIY friends. If you love building things, fixing things, learning new skills, well, you are in the right place. Welcome to Home Built Workshop. My name is Jeff, and here I like to tackle pretty much anything DIY, anything hands-on. I want to give it a shot, from woodworking, metalworking, leathercraft, tips and tricks, guitar building, you name it. I want to try it. And if that sounds like you, if that sounds like content that you'd be interested in, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Love to have you follow along. Make sure you turn on notifications so that you get notified when I upload new videos, such as this one about the Janka scale, which we're going to get back to right now. So what is this mysterious Janka scale, and how is it going to help me out with my projects? It's a great question. Some of you are probably already familiar with that, but if you're not, the Janka scale, in the most simple definition that I can possibly think of, is just a numeric representation of the hardness of a piece of wood. It's just numbers. The higher the number, the harder the piece of wood. The lower the number, the softer the piece of wood. It's that simple. This number is determined by a specific test that they do on each species of wood. They must have some sort of a special press set up because they take a ball bearing of a specific size and they press it exactly halfway into the piece of wood. They have some sort of data collection and they measure that amount of force, and that amount of force is then becomes the Janka hardness rating. It's kind of cool, and I'd like to see that test performed. I think that'd be pretty neat. There's lots of places that list the Janka hardness ratings for almost any species of wood, but mainly one that I like to use myself and I rely on for quite a lot of things is called the Wood Database. This is not sponsored or anything, but it is a resource that I use fairly often if I'm trying to decide materials to use, or I just want to know how hard a particular piece of wood is, compare it to another one. The Wood Database is a great resource for finding a ton of other information besides the Janka hardness rating. It really is my go-to spot if I'm trying to look up a specific species of wood. So let's say you want to build a particular project, but maybe you're not sure of what kind of wood you want to use for it. How can the Janka hardness scale help you determine the type of wood that you want to use? I've printed off a list of some of the popular species just so I have some reference material here, and let's use the workbench example that I gave at the beginning of this video, and we'll exaggerate the species just a little bit for some dramatic effect. Let's just say, for example, you were thinking of building your brand new workbench from, I don't know, Western red cedar or Padauk. Maybe you were looking at those two. Now, I know those are wild options and you probably wouldn't go with either one, but let's just use those as an example. If I look up the Janka hardness of Western red cedar, we'd find that it's 350. And if we compare that to the Janka hardness of Padauk, Padauk is 1,725. Now remember, the higher the number, the harder the piece of wood, the lower the number, the softer the piece of wood. So if we were looking for a very hard material to use for a new workbench, Western red cedar, according to these numbers, may not be the best choice. If it's much lower, we know that it's going to dent easily because it doesn't take a whole lot of force to push that steel ball bearing into the wood. So what that tells us is that if it doesn't take a lot of force to press the bearing into the wood, well, if we drop a hammer or some other tool onto it, a piece of wood, whatever it is, it's going to dent easily as well. It may not be the best choice for our fancy new workbench. In keeping with our workbench example, let's say we chose that Padauk. Now, we make a trip to the lumber store and we find out pretty quickly that buying Padauk in that kind of quantity, well, it's not going to be as inexpensive as we were hoping. So now we need to find a better suitable alternative. Now we can start comparing Janka numbers to other species to try to find something similar to the Padauk, and we can look at hard maple, for example, is 1,450. That's not a whole lot less than the Padauk. Or maybe we find purple heart. Purple heart is a Janka hardness of 1,860. Can you imagine a purple heart workbench entirely? That'd be kind of cool. Probably not as inexpensive as we'd want either, but still would be kind of cool. Hopefully you can see how by comparing the Janka hardness numbers, we can start to make different choices in some of the materials that we choose to build our projects from. Another place that I find these numbers are very helpful is in the guitar and instrument building world. Let's take a fretboard, for example, and I would say maybe the three most common would be ebony, rosewood, and maple. Those are widely used all over the place as fretboards. But what if you wanted to use something different? Maybe you had a lot of a different kind of wood that you really thought looked cool. Maybe it's got some sort of figure in there and you really want to use it as a fretboard. Well, knowing the Janka hardness of things like ebony, rosewood, and maple, you can start to compare the material that you may have on hand to some of these others and determine if it's suitable or not for a fretboard. If it's really soft, something like silver maple, which I have quite a bit on hand, but it's not hard enough to stand up to the use and the abuse of a fretboard, and it's probably going to show its wear a lot earlier than I would like it to. On the other hand, let's say you had a piece of lignum vitae, which is, to my knowledge, one of the most densest, hardest pieces of wood. Well, given the Janka hardness rating, that's way up here, 4,390. I'm not going to try to make a fretboard out of that because it's just way too dense, way too hard, and would probably destroy my cutting tools. These Janka numbers aren't just helpful for determining a material to build a fretboard. In the guitar world, you can use it for all kinds of different applications. Let's take a solid body guitar, for example. Maybe you wanted to build a solid body guitar from swamp ash. Swamp ash is popular because of its lightweight, yet still has a nice durability, but it's also getting harder to find. So if we look at our list, swamp ash is rated at an 850 Janka rating. So if we look around that number, we find that just above that is yellow pine. Yellow pine is 870. So there's an option. If we look just below that, alder. Alder is 760. So there's a couple of other options that are similar to swamp ash that you might consider using. Maybe you can get a particular species locally in your area, and by looking at these numbers, making some comparisons, helps you make a decision on a material for your new electric guitar. In the acoustic world, you can use these numbers for a ton of things as well. You can use it to compare different species for backs and side sets. Maybe you want to use a different species of wood for a neck. You can compare it to other species that maybe you're familiar with. Also, you can use it to compare brace woods. In fact, let's look up a couple of these. Spruce is pretty popular for bracing. If we look up Sitka spruce, we find that Sitka has a rating of 510. Engelmann spruce has a rating of 390. Basswood has a rating of 410. And yellow poplar has a rating of 540. So they're all very similar. Now, I don't know if I'd choose poplar specifically for braces, but you get the idea, hopefully, of how you can start comparing different species of wood for your project that you're working on. So there it is, our brief introduction to the Janka Hardness Scale, and hopefully you'd have a little bit more understanding of how you can use the Janka Hardness Scale and use these numbers to help determine what woods you could use or maybe not to use on whatever project it is you're working on. I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If you did, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, and I'd like to hear from all of you. What sort of uses have you found in your shop where these Janka numbers have helped you make a determination for a particular project? I'd love to hear. Leave it down in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time.